One of the most famous names in the hip-hop world is now facing 3 charges in federal court. Many people have come forward in recent months to accuse Sean Diddy Combs of abuse, sex trafficking, drug possession, and more, but now the federal government is getting involved and promising to bring down the rap mogul's alleged criminal empire. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that.
Talk about a day in the legal and crime world. And today, it all centers around Sean Diddy Combs and all of these details and filings in his new criminal case. And we're going to break it down for you right now, give you everything you need to know. So, the Southern District of New York is promising justice for multiple victims who say that rapper, producer, businessman Combs used his power, influence, and wealth to intimidate them into doing his bidding, whether that was obtaining drugs or performing sexually or cleaning up after apparent sex acts. Now, we've of course been reporting on Combs for months here on Sidebar. In November of last year, Cassandra Ventura, Cassie Combs' ex, filed a huge lawsuit against him, claiming that he abused her physically, sexually, emotionally for years before she was finally able to get away. Now, Combs denied everything she had to say in her filing. He settled the lawsuit with her just one day after it was filed, but we know that set off a chain reaction. Multiple other lawsuits against him and even against his son were filed, alleging sexual abuse, sex trafficking, illegal narcotics possession, violence. Then, in March of this year, Homeland Security agents, they show up at Combs' homes in both Miami and Los Angeles, search warrants in hand. They raided both locations, seemingly collecting a huge amount of evidence, which we will get through in a moment. And we learned at the time that this was connected to a sex trafficking investigation out of the Southern District of New York, but we didn't know all the exact details. Well, you fast forward to this week, and Combs was officially arrested Monday night at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York out in Manhattan. According to his defense team, he had been booked there since September 5th, that was nearly 2 weeks ago, and he was in town in anticipation of the charges being filed, which is important because now that Combs has been arrested and charged, he says this is an example to show he's not a flight risk. He's been cooperative. However, when U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, again from the Southern District of New York, held a press conference and was asked about Combs' cooperation in this case, he seemed skeptical.
Let me just say this. I think that generally with increasing frequency, the word cooperative or cooperating has taken on tremendous elasticity and no longer really bears any relation to what the word means when we use it in a very specific context. So responding to lawful process and the like does not qualify as cooperation when we use that term here.
Now, there are still questions about future filings, possible charges against co-conspirators, whether Combs will be hit with additional charges. What we do know is we are now getting a look at what the prosecution believes they can prove. And that brings me to this major indictment against Sean Combs. So, prosecutors filed documents in federal court that lay out the accusations against Combs and his associates. Although, to be clear, Combs is the only one named in this filing for now. He faces 3 charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, during a hearing on Tuesday, Combs entered a not guilty plea to every charge. And if he is convicted of all charges, Combs faces a minimum of 15 years in prison with the possibility that the 54-year-old could spend the rest of his life behind bars. That's what we're talking about here. So we're going to break down each of these counts for you, as well as more on why Combs says he should be allowed out on bail while he waits trial. And let's start with the indictment. It's 14 pages, jam-packed with information. I want to hit the highlights. So first, right out of the gate, the government lays out some pretty damning accusations. Quote, "For decades, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. P. D, Love," they, throughout the course of this indictment, refer to him by his many monikers, the defendant, abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Which brings me now to count one, racketeering conspiracy. So the main idea here is that there is a criminal agreement, an agreement to engage in racketeering. And racketeering is when there is a criminal enterprise, it's like organized crime, a grouping of people who break the law. They commit crimes. Now, it doesn't need to be Sean Combs Breaks the Law LLC. You don't need an official company. Just an organized group of people, organized crime. And a criminal enterprise is supposed to have a common goal. So whether it was to benefit financially, whether it was to satisfy Sean Combs' sexual desires, whether it was to protect him, there has to be a common goal in mind. We saw this, we're seeing this actually, I should say, in the Young Thug trial out of Georgia. Big thing for the prosecution is they have listed a number of different crimes. They're trying to say this wasn't done in an individual capacity, but it was done to further that gang. Similar idea here. Okay. Now also, as you're going to see here, in a racketeering case, there are numerous predicate crimes. These are underlying crimes that Combs is not specifically charged with, like arson or kidnapping or forced labor, but they are crimes under the umbrella of the larger criminal enterprise. By the way, I should tell you, the racketeering allegations that we see in this indictment are very consistent with the allegations put forward by Rodney Little Rod Jones, Combs' former producer, who was one of the people that filed a sexual assault lawsuit against him and said there were violations of racketeering law. In fact, although no one is specifically named in this indictment, you can kind of see who those alleged victims of Combs are, their allegations, that they were the basis for the charges here, especially Cassandra Ventura. Because we all know that when that video back in 2016 was released by CNN a few months ago of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura in a hotel elevator bank, that was publicized for the whole world to see, and he apologized for on Instagram. That is mentioned specifically in this indictment. Now, reading from the indictment, it says, quote, "The defendant and others, known and unknown, participated in unlawful and other activities related to the conduct of the Combs Enterprises affairs. These individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of Combs security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as other close associates of Combs." Now, one of the most startling examples of Combs' alleged control over those around him came from the description of apparent sex parties called freak-offs. This is something that Ventura and others alleged in their lawsuits. What are they? Well, the indictment says Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, I'm not going to say the next part, basically pleasured himself during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. So this is also kind of a flavor of the sex trafficking charge, which we'll get to a little bit later. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. The indictment then provides more details about what Combs expected his employees to do before, during, and after these sessions.
Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff. The indictment alleges that those individuals facilitated the freak-offs. They booked the hotel rooms and stocked them with the supplies, including drugs, baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. When the hotel rooms got damaged, they helped clean it up. They arranged for victims and commercial sex workers to travel for the freak-offs, and they delivered large quantities of cash to Combs to pay for the commercial sex workers.